And now we present to you Thac0 with Advantage.
Welcome to Thac0 with Advantage. We're two friends that have been playing D&D a long time. While we both love lots of other RPGs, D&D grants us XP for doing the show. Hi, I'm Ange, and it took me a while to acknowledge that I had actually gained enough experience on my character sheet to call myself a seasoned game master. I may have been gaming for over 3 decades, but it took a while to multi-class from forever player into occasional GM, and I should have realized when I started writing for Gnome Stew and running the Gnomecast that I qualified for the Prestige class.
I'm Jared, and I've been playing D&D for about 126 days, and by that I mean, if you add up all of the hours that I play D&D together, it is 126 days or so. You can find reviews that I've written in the past at gnomestew.com, and you can also find some at my site, whatdoiknowjr.com. After we look at the games we're running in the campaign journal, we'll be talking about experience points, both historically and how to use them in our games. Then we'll have some recommendations of D&D related content for you to check out in our downtime research segment.
Now stand by for station identification. This is WD&D the Role Player. Now we're going to Mac McKinney in the morning game with Wolfman. You may have heard of the XP for Gold rule, but D&D co-creator Dave Arneson had a more radical idea. Adventurers should only gain XP for gold they spent. After his early exit from TSR, he formalized this concept in his Judges Guild supplement, The First Fantasy Campaign. So why did he do that? So you see, Dave A didn't want you to just get XP for spending gold, he had to categorize it. His system divided expenditures into 7 specific groups: wine, women, song, wealth, fame, religion, and hobby. Way to gatekeep women and LGBTQIA+ gamers there, Dave. Too true, Wolfman, too true. Should have been booze, sexual partners, entertainment, wealth, fame, personal ideology, and hobby. That's not a bad list, Wolfman. Now, your final XP total depended on 2 incredibly dense charts that interacted in a way that's about as easy to figure out as the 3 seashells in Demolition Man. He wasn't quite the law in that film, but Snipes totally matrixed before Neo did. I knew Kung Fu.
Let me just finish up this campaign journal.
Since we last talked, I've played in Indus, ran Victoriana Dreadful Inquiries, and went to a gaming convention where I actually played D&D. Picking up where we left off in Indus, we rested after defeating the entity that had corrupted and destroyed the Heart Tree. We had raised the Archdruid Kiona and discussed the past with her and what was up with that region. As Dove, I asked Kai how he was feeling after completing that whole part of his quest, but also now having this new responsibility with the seed and the new elemental Thundercrane that was his companion. I mostly did this to kind of spark some roleplay between the PCs. I'll probably talk about this over on Gnome Stew, but since my Critical Role kick, I've begun to realize that I want to encourage more interactions between the PCs instead of just between the PCs and the GM. It's something I've started noticing in a lot more of the games I play, where there's some great role-playing between the player and the GM, but not as much between the individual players. We determined that we wanted to head next to the sunken city of Tuara and find the sword that is fabled to be deadly to Asmodeus. Modron, our Aasimar warlock, cast Gate to get us to the destroyed city of Karkandor. We found out through Kiona that in her time, that city, port city, had been known as Esterhaven, and it was known for its culture and its art, but it had been taken over by demons at the same time the Sacred Grove was taken over and she lost her life. We arrived at the site of what had once been probably a wonderful vineyard. Amazingly, it looked as if everything was still in good condition. There was fruit and wine on the tables. The courtyard it had some destruction, but it wasn't as shattered and ruined as it should have been. Of course, this meant there was some sort of supernatural shenanigans going on, and it was a fight. We ended up fighting a couple of different spirits that we couldn't see, but we could harm if we managed to actually land a hit on them. One of them could possess statues, which ended up making reconsider her need for a statue, since now she doesn't want to be possessed even as a statue. We took a short rest after that fight to gather ourselves and then headed south into the heart of the ruined city. We could sense something in the center of the city, so followed that and found a hill that held an altar that seemed to be the source of a battle between good and evil in that city. Like it was one little bastion of hope and goodness in this city that had been corrupted and contaminated by evil. And we could sense that there was still fiends trying to corrupt it. And we briefly debated whether or not we should engage with it, because it's one of those things where if we could fix this particular wound, it could help everything everywhere else. But also, are we ready to deal with this? So we ended up deciding to basically pause on that and continue heading towards the sunken city to try and retrieve the blade. Kiona chose to stay behind. So next session should be us arriving at the sunken city, which currently with the tides and the season of year is actually not completely underwater. So we've got our underwater breathing ready, but we may not need to use it. In Victoriana, 2 of my players were unavailable. One because of a family issue that they had to head out of town for, and one because we were due to get our first snow of the season before the session would have wrapped up. Ah, the problems of playing in person. I still went ahead and ran for the 3 players I did have, though. So we inducted our gadgeteer, Digsby Pembroke, into the association, and then a couple of days later, he, along with the animist Lord Felix Trucco and our dodger, Davin Danksworth, were roused from their beds at an early hour and asked to come to the scene of a murder. They were basically being requested to consult as detectives and see what they could figure out about the scene of the crime. The session essentially was them going through the crime scene, the whole house, and figuring out what they could figure out from that and what clues they could gather. Because the session was just them investigating the house, we paused before they could go talk to neighbors or follow any other clues in the area. When we play next, we should be able to easily insert the other 2 characters, our raconteur, Captain Maxwell Marlowe, and our thaumaturge, Lord Winston Alastair Ramsay III of Blackheath. Yes, that is the name he wrote on his character sheet. We'll pick up from there, and I'll probably have to recap some of the stuff they discovered in the house, because I'm sure they'll want to go in and verify of their own some of the clues, but it should be good enough to get us moving. This past weekend, I attended UConn in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It, as always, is a fantastic con. If you're in the region and want to go to a great con, I highly recommend that. Now, our regular listeners will know that I always joke that I don't play D&D at cons because we have D&D at home. But I made an exception here because my friend was running the sequel to his previous D&D game that I played this past spring at another small private con. And this time I played the lizard folk shaman that could turn into a dinosaur. It was a fun game, but it did reinforce why I generally don't play D&D at cons. No one else at the table was really interested in role-playing much. They engaged with the encounters and seemed to enjoy the combat and the world, but no one role-played as their character. I was all set to get my sibilant S's on this lizard folk. But when no one else engaged, I kind of gave that up. I'm told the second session of it he ran had more folks lean into the role-playing, so I maybe just chose the wrong session, but it still kind of reinforced that I know what I'm going to get when I play D&D with the people I know.
Yeah, I understand. So, I feel like there's something that I used to do with polyhedral dice and books and stuff. That seems to be a thing. Yeah, so I should be running my Curse of Strahd game this weekend, and the Thursday night game might get one more session in before it goes into hibernation until January, so that's where I'm at in gaming right now.
Hey, at least it's not as bad as last year.
It's not quite that bad.
Last year, we got one session in October, and then nothing until January.
Yeah, it was rough.
It was like, oh boy.
Before we proceed any further, our Eldritch Invocation. we've got a Patreon. So if you're enjoying our show and would like to help us keep giving you the best fantasy game content, we would love it if you would join us there. In addition to helping us make the podcast, we also provide additional content for our backers, like Paragons of the Cosmos, a Daggerheart campaign frame to bring to life a setting inspired by Masters of the Universe, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, and all the iterations of those things over the years. You can find our Patreon at patreon.com/THAC0WA.
Welcome to the Dungeon Master's Workshop.
Moving on into the Dungeon Master's Workshop. Advancing your character has been a part of RPGs since the very beginning. In D&D, that has always been through experience points, allowing characters to accrue points until they hit the threshold to gain another level. How we've handled XP, though, has changed through the years and the various editions. And today, there are multiple philosophies on how to best handle this integral part of the campaign. So let's discuss. How was experience handled in the very early editions of D&D?
So back then, it was at least as important for you to get gold, because you would get XP for all of the gold that you recovered if you got it out of the dungeon, which is the important part there. But you did get some XP for fighting monsters too. But the point was, if you could get the gold and get back to the beginning of the dungeon, you would get experience points and potentially level up so that later on you might survive an encounter with one of those monsters.
Why on earth would they tie advancement to treasure?
Because when they first started this, it was very focused on a specific type of playing that was really influenced by Gygax being a Conan fan. The whole Conan and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser and all of that kind of pulp fantasy was very much, you go into a dangerous place to go get rich and then come back out. And that's really what they had in mind for all of this. It was like, yeah, you might fight monsters, but the main point is, you see a dungeon, you know there's treasure in it, you go in, you bring the treasure out of it.
It seems like it's just designed to create, I mean, not murder hobos because they're trying to avoid fighting the monsters, but basically just people being greedy.
It is, and it's also interesting because I know there's a lot of people that have talked about how that does encourage people to play more strategically and, you know, more cautiously. But to me, that's also kind of weird because it also feels like when you look at some of the gameplay loops where it's like you get, you know, a ton of XP for this treasure if you can get it out. And also you need hirelings to help you haul all of this treasure. And also you need hirelings to be slower than you and get eaten by the monsters because you don't care because all you want is treasure. That style of play does not feel especially heroic.
Yeah, I only played first edition for a while. Like it was, I think I started playing in fall of '86, and it was late '88 or early '89 that second edition came out, something like that. It was only a couple of years that I played first edition.
Yeah, the second edition was '89, so yeah.
Yeah, but even then, I heard the horror stories about people trying to game the system with going for treasure instead of anything else, or like completely just bypassing the plot the GM was trying to run for everyone because there wasn't enough obvious treasure in the pitch for that adventure.
This will also be shocking, but if you read the DMG, in one place it's saying you get 1 XP for 1 gold that you get out of the dungeon. If you read further, it starts going into, if it was slightly challenging but not completely challenging, you should possibly assign them 50% of the XP for that treasure. If it was especially challenging, you might give them 20% more. So there was this whole other thing you're supposed to be doing saying, well, that was too easy for you to get that treasure out. So actually, that 1,000 gold pieces is worth like 10 gold pieces because you didn't do that much.
You know, it's obvious that the earliest editions of D&D were enough to get people interested and hooked. But I just can't with people today who look back on those and like, those were the best designed games. No, there's a lot of hit and miss there, man. There was a lot of counter, like conflicting statements in those rules.
It's really interesting because it's even evident when you look at the adventures that they put out. The earliest adventures are, let's do this memorable dungeon that doesn't necessarily have it has a theme to it, but it's not like you're going in there to stop this great evil. You're going in there to find valuable stuff. And even by the end of first edition, Gygax was doing things like the Queen of the Demon Web Pits and the Temple of Elemental Evil, where you are expected to eventually like keep Lolth from absorbing the world into her demon web pits, or, you know, fighting back against the elemental cultists. So at some point, I think it did start to click that, wow, we are just encouraging people just to like be money grubbers, and maybe we need to nudge them into a slightly different style of play.
I mean, there is something to be said playing with other people and seeing how they do things. You know, I'm sure there was a certain style of play with the people they were actually playing with on the regular, and that may not have been the same as what people picked up from those books. Anyway, what was different in the next wave of D&D? How did things change with second edition?
I was kind of interested because I went back and started rereading my PDF of the second edition Dungeon Master's Guide, and already in the second edition one, they're starting to tell you should probably have as much XP coming from story goals and things like that as you do from monsters. So already by the time you get to second edition, they're thinking, you know, there are objectives you want people to do. There's other things you want to entice them to do other than just getting treasure. So if you have these story events that make sense for the type of characters they make, you need to create those and hand out XP for those things. It also had a list in the DMG of different like individual class XP awards. Some of them are kind of no-brainers because it was sort of like, if you're a cleric and you manage to turn undead, you should get extra XP for that. If you're a thief and you steal gold, you should get 2 XP per gold that you steal. So you're not handing out gold to everybody, but you are handing out gold to the thief. Or XP to the thief. So that was kind of interesting. It was a faster evolution than I expected. I thought second was still a little more crunchy with some of those things, but it was saying like you should give them at least as much XP and story goals as you're doing with everything else. At the same time, you had the BECME basic box sets, and they specifically say XP comes from 5 sources: role-playing, party goals, defeating monsters, treasure, exceptional actions. So in BECME, you were still getting the XP for treasure, but also you were supposed to be looking at all of these other things specifically every session and seeing if they got XP for those things as well.
That makes me think of some of the indie games that give you the list of questions to ask at the end of a session.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And like all these points that if your character hits these points, you can maybe get an XP point to add something to your character.
It's kind of funny because the way that BECME framed those 5 sources, it almost feels like the bridge between first edition and second edition, where it's saying, oh yeah, you should still be doing this stuff with treasure and things like that, but also layer these other things in.
The one thing that second edition did keep from first edition was that classes leveled at different rates. Why did they do that? Why were there different leveling thresholds?
Because instead of trying to get a first level character of this class to balance with a first level character of this other class, there was sort of this feeling of, we can make some of these classes just incredibly powerful if they never gain levels. And that was kind of the balancing that they did with their game design at that point in time. We can give a barbarian a D12 hit die if it takes him, 150% more experience than the rogue has to get.
I remember people debating which classes to play based on how fast they leveled. If you could tough it out as a wizard, you'd be pretty powerful eventually.
Yeah, the funny thing about rogues, or not, actually it is rogues. In second edition, they organized all of the classes under these larger containers. We get the name rogue for thieves now because the overall container that the thief and the bard were put into was the rogue. Everybody that was in the same container had the same XP progression. So fighters, rangers, paladins all had the same progression. Wizards and specialists all had the same progression. Clerics and druids had the same progression. Now, here's the funny thing. In second edition, bards went from being the world's first and most complicated prestige class to just being a class. And they were spellcasters. If you could hold out for those first couple levels when you didn't get spells, you were leveling way faster than any of the other spellcasters in the game.
Yep. I actually had been playing a I believe Beja was a mage thief in first edition when second edition came out. And I had just themed her around the fact that she would go play a lute at different places, as part of her shtick. So when second edition came out and we translated our characters into second edition, she became an actual bard without having to do the ridiculousness that was a first edition bard. Because, again, those games back in that day, there was no way we were getting that many levels to get that on my character sheet.
Well, and the thing is, it's not just that you had to get those levels. It's that if you were currently leveling up as a fighter and you did something thief-like, you didn't get any XP for that session because you fell back onto your old habits and therefore you cannot learn anything more about being a fighter. You had to only use the abilities of your current class that you were leveling up.
I hate that so much. Were there any dramatic changes in how experience was handled from second to third edition or third to fourth edition?
So the funny thing about third edition is we can look back at like first edition and still second edition to some extent and look at some of the tables and charts and think, wow, this is so complicated and some of this is contradicting each other. Third edition was much better about not contradicting itself. It was not better about having charts that were extremely complicated. It's just that the math worked a little bit better than it did in the earlier editions. Because I was reminded as I looked back in there, third edition had a sliding scale of this level of encounter for these level of PCs for this number of PCs gives you a different XP total that you split amongst all the people. And there was a chart that you would have to follow to look at that. And before you say, well, that's not that bad, if you had, say, a CR3 creature and it was working for a CR10 boss, you had to then figure out how CR10 plus CR3 equated to give you an encounter level, which then you could measure on the chart. So then you were like doing all of this, averaging things out between the different things in the encounter. And there was just a lot of math involved in that.
I never ran a campaign in original third edition, but I did run a campaign in Pathfinder, and they still used something like that. I think they cleaned it up a little bit, but it was still...
It was a little easier, yeah.
It was still a chart where you had to figure out this, I've got this many monsters of this CR, and this is what... it was math. It was a lot of math.
It was. Now, the other thing it did call out in the DMG that you were supposed to get XP for traps, you were supposed to get story awards, and you're supposed to get role-playing awards. Role-playing awards is interesting because I think that's a thing that people gravitated towards because they're like, oh, this will make people role-play more. And then people scaled back from because sometimes it can feel like, hey, that person role-played their character, but they don't have like this boisterous, outgoing personality. This other person is loud and funny every time they roleplay their character, so they deserve more XP than the other person that's more subdued. And it's like, you want to encourage things, but I don't know that you want to encourage that.
Yeah. Role-playing should not be just having a funny voice. Role-playing is more than that. And there's a broad spectrum of what people can be doing with their characters and still be role-playing.
Yeah, and to bring up like academic nightmares from high school, that person that is so over the top is screwing up the grading curve for everybody else. Because the other person that's doing just fine role-playing their character that should get XP doesn't seem like they're doing near as much as that person that just naturally falls into character and just goes over the top every time they do it.
And I have met, in the course of my many years of playing role-playing games, I have met many people who think they are fantastic role players because they can role play their character with a voice and drama, and they are horrible to game with because they don't share the spotlight. They do things that screw everyone else over. They're not fun to play with, but because they can do the cool voice and they can get into character, and that's what my character would do. That's not role playing. That's just being a jerk.
I had a player in multiple campaigns that his theory was you didn't get good role-playing unless there was inter-party conflict. So his character's job was to find any minor thing that would be a wedge between him and another player and blow it out of proportion until, they ended up having a fight.
Yeah, that's not what this means. That's not what any of this means. I will say 3rd edition also, like we mentioned before, different classes leveling at different rates. 3rd edition introduced the idea that everyone leveled up at the same rate.
Yes.
They had balanced the classes so that once you got 1,000 XP, you went to 2nd level, regardless of what class you were playing. I had been out of the D&D loop for about a decade, but I remember hearing some of the drama from the grog nerds who were horrified by this change.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is it also meant, because they were balancing everybody against each other, Wizards didn't have that whole awkward, you're going to have like 3 or 4 levels where you're just a liability to the party. We're just bringing you along because someday you'll be able to cast useful spells. But right now you can cast 1 spell and it's probably not useful. And 3rd edition did not have that. Wizards were still limited because we didn't have like the unlimited cantrips like we have now. But at the very least, you were more likely to be able to throw a few more spells. You were more likely to at least take at least 1 punch to the face at 1st level because things did get rebalanced a little bit.
I think also 3rd edition killed the concept of different experience thresholds for different classes for pretty much all games afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't think I can recall of any game since that has tried to do something where the archetype you play means you level at a different rate from the other characters.
The only place you could probably say is when somebody is doing like a retro clone and they are intentionally making it feel a little bit more like older editions of D&D. But even then, I've seen retro clones that have rebalanced things to where you're leveling at the same XP thresholds too. So that's not even a universal. For all of the crap that 4th edition gets, especially when people are talking about how it's just a combat simulator or it's just trying to be a video game on the table, you know what 4th edition did that none of these other editions did? There was an actual chart that said, this is how much XP you should get for completing a major quest. This is how much XP you should get for a minor quest for different levels all the way through the game. And the reason I point this out is all of those other editions, when they're saying like hand out story awards, hand out role-playing awards, they very rarely said how much.
Yeah.
They just said, come up with an idea, figure it out. 3rd edition was basically like, get a general idea of how hard it was to do something and equate it to combat and then figure it out. 4th edition actually just said, hey, if somebody is completing a quest or a story thing, this is how much it should be worth. And I really appreciate that for them being that clear with it. And also it was very explicit about how skill challenges are worth this much XP if this is how many successes you needed to have. And traps and hazards had their own CR level, so you would get specific XP for those. So, like a lot of things with 4th edition, it was very precise about these things, but also pat 4th edition on the back for actually having that quest XP spelled out for somebody that was running the game.
4th edition had, I mean, we've talked about this before. 4th edition had a lot of hidden gems.
Oh, yeah.
Within it that just got lost in the shuffle for a fairly wide variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything new that 5th edition brought to the table in regards to experience points?
It kind of reframes some of the things, but also is looking at the same things until you get to the optional rules. So you get XP for combat encounters, non-combat encounters, and this is what's interesting, because the term milestone does get used sometimes when it doesn't mean exactly what it means in the DMG, because milestones in the DMG were you have certain things that you want to see happen in the campaign, you set an XP target for that thing, and once they do that thing, they get the XP for it. What's interesting is what a lot of people are thinking of when they're thinking of milestones is the story-based advancement, which is what it mentions in the optional rules, which is basically saying there are certain points in the story where you want people to level up. Once they reach that point in the story, you let them level up. On top of that, there's also session-based advancement, which is just basically determine how many sessions you want between people leveling up. So you might say 1 at first level and 2 at second level, and then from then on, every 4 sessions, we're going to level up. That's what the session-based was designed to do.
I think a lot of that offers alternatives to GMs to run their campaigns, because we've talked before about how people have campaigns go on forever and never get to the higher levels. You know, you spend forever as a certain level, and when you get into some of these optional ideas about how to do experience that 5th edition kind of presented, even if they didn't present well, they basically offer alternatives to play the game and let people get to some of the cool stuff without having to do the slog.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. There were some great adventure paths that Pathfinder put out. And almost always there was 1 or 2 adventures that were like, oh, this is the one where they want us to level up to where they want us to be to fight the villain in the next adventure, because this is just an endless frickin' dungeon that has nothing to do with the rest of this storyline.
What are some other ways of handling XP that have been done in modern D&D style games?
So there's lots of different explosions that have come out of this mindset. Just to see the reaction from you, I wanted to throw out 7th Sea 2nd edition and how it does experience.
There's a lot I like about the 2nd edition of 7th Sea. Experience and advancement is not one of them. Not at all.
Advancements cost a certain number of points, and in order to get that advancement, you have to come up with a story for your character that has that many steps. This sounds like it would be great for encouraging people to come up with stories for their characters. Effectively, it is, I have finished this story and I still have 3 more steps. What do I do now? Or we did something in the campaign where I can never finish my advancement track for this thing until after we finish the entire campaign now.
Yep.
There's some issues with it.
Yep, it was neat idea to give each character goals and things they wanted to pursue, but unless you had a GM working with you very carefully in how to set up that goal and those steps, it was very easy to just never get anywhere with any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Neat idea, should have been completely separate from advancement.
Going along with what you'd mentioned before when we were talking about Beckme, Band of Blades, which is a Forged in the Dark game, at the end of each session, for each archetype, you ask a different set of questions, and you get an XP for each one of those questions that is true. Each archetype, some of them may be common, but some of them will be like the guy that's supposed to be there protecting the bridge so that all of his companions can get their job done is going to get XP for fighting off a big horde of people, and the other people are going to get it for sneaking into a place. So it is doing that sort of thing where it's, doing that checklist. Did you play to your archetype? Did you do your job in the party? I do think it's kind of interesting that Pathfinder 2nd edition basically has just changed things to where every time you get 1,000 XP, you get a level. But you're basically kind of figuring out what easy and medium and hard encounters are and slotting it into that 1,000. And then once you hit 1,000, you start over again. So you're not tracking things until I have 2,578 XP. You're just like, this is the 3rd time I have gotten 1,000 XP.
It is an interesting idea. It seems like it would try and make the math a little easier.
I do think it's funny because, like, I'm looking at some of these systems that are fantasy games, some more or less like D&D. Pugmire just says you get levels when the story guide says so. And Daggerheart says, well, you set milestones, and when you hit those milestones, you get a level. So right there, that is definitely much more in line with some of the alternate things that, we've seen in 5th edition.
Do you want to know one of my pet peeves about this topic in relation to other game systems? Sometimes they call experience, advancement, whatever, something completely different. I was trying to run a very short Dragon Age campaign using the age system, and I could not, for the life of me, find anywhere in that book or PDF where it talked about experience points or advancement. I can't even remember the word that they used, but it was just like, why can't I just tell me? what do I give my players when they do stuff so they can get more cool stuff?
You played in my game of this, but the One Ring Second Edition, you get adventure points and you get skill points, and you can't spend those on the same things. Those are for different types of advancement.
Yeah.
And neither one of them are called experience points. I will say one of my kind of pet peeves is Cypher System does this thing where you get XP whenever you hit certain goals, or when the GM intrudes and changes the stakes of a given encounter. My problem is you spend XP to get new abilities, but you also can spend it for things like rerolls, so it's also sort of like inspiration. I don't like making that choice. I don't like that.
Yeah, I struggled with that one too. The couple of times I've played Cypher System where it's been more than just a one shot, but I want to get the next set of cool things. I want to add cool things to my characters. I know with Savage Worlds, the way that it has experience set up is you're supposed to keep track of like how many sessions you've played, because each session or each adventure should get them a certain number of quote unquote points. But basically it ends up being you tell everyone when they get an advancement.
Yeah.
And then after you've gotten a certain number of advancements, that takes you from one tier to another. So you start as novice. I think on your 4th advancement, you become seasoned. And, that changes the options of what you can do. There's certain things that are limited based on it. I think it's a fairly solid experience system. I don't know how long the campaign can go for compared to like the unending, journey that D&D can sometimes be, but it's something I've liked as I've been running a campaign in it. I
kind of like Warhammer Fantasy and a lot of the 40K things that have that same D100 style to it. You get XP per session, but you're not tracking that to level up. You just have different advancements that cost a certain amount of XP, and then you just buy those advancements. And you don't have to take the same advancements. There's not one track. So like you can spend it on things like skills or talents or new careers, but you don't have to do a certain, number of those things. You could always level up your skills until you can't level up your skills anymore. Getting a new career basically gives you access to different talents, so that's why you would do that. So you're spending something up front to get greater variety, even though you're not getting anything right away. But I kind of like that. That's been very interesting, and I've seen that in multiple 40K games, and it's also in the fantasy version of Warhammer.
Yeah, and I think there's like the original XP debate that I remember hearing back in the 90s and stuff when I was starting to pay more attention to this type of thing was the level-based versus just points-based. Level-based, it's like you get your special stuff when you get to the level, and you get the things that level unlocks. Whereas more points-based games, it's just when you have enough points, you can buy the next upgrade on a certain feature of your character.
And then 13th Age is always... 13th Age is the laid-back uncle of all of the fantasy games, because it's basically like, you should probably give them a level every 4 sessions, but that's just us. You can do it like whenever you want.
The cool uncle who'll share his special cookies with you. As long as you're old enough. So let's get into the philosophy kind of modern, like some of the debates about modern XP. Why would somebody want to use milestone XP to just declare when the players level their characters?
We touched on it earlier, but when you're playing through some of these adventures, that once they do X certain thing, it's going to move them on to the next chapter of the adventure. If they don't do all of the little alternate things in that chapter, do you want them to still be 3rd level, or do you want them to be 4th level when they head into that next chapter? If you definitely want them to be 4th level and not have to find every tiny little thing or have to come up with their own little side quests, you just give them the level when they start the next chapter.
I brought this particular topic of experience points up because I got into an argument on the internet in a GM group, somebody asked the question about they're playing a second edition game and they were in an encounter where they could not engage in the target. It was a flying combat and they were stuck on the ground, and while they could get to under where the combat was, none of their abilities could reach their foes. And they were told at the end of that session that they got no experience points because they did not participate in the combat. And, their question was like, is this fair? And I'm like, oh, hell no, man. Of course that's not fair. That's not cool. You were there. You participated in the game. The fact that the logistics of the encounter excluded you shouldn't exclude you from the fact that you participated in the game. And this kind of brought up the concept that I just do milestone XP because I am not an accountant. I do not have time to do all of that math. So I'm going to figure, sometimes I'll do a little bit of math. In some of my previous campaigns, I've done a little bit of, jot down what the encounters were. And I'm like, okay, they're about to where I think they should level. And it's a good story point. So just go ahead and level. But it's like, come on, man. We're all here to have fun. We're all here to do cool stuff. At this point, many of us are grown-ass adults with jobs and families and other responsibilities, and we don't have time to play like we used to play when we were kids. Even kids today can't play like we used to play when we were kids. I can't tell you how hard it was to arrange games with teen groups I've run for.
Mm-hmm.
They've all got lots of responsibilities. So it's like sometimes you just wanna get to the cool stuff. So let people level. Don't make it busy work. If you want to grind, go find an MMO and play that.
I mean, it really does give you the flexibility to say, especially if you're the DM and you're about to throw this massive boss at your PCs that they don't know about, you can say, yeah, just level up now. It's like, just level up because you don't know what I'm going to throw at you next session.
Yeah, when my friend ran the Tyranny of Dragons campaign, there were reasons she wanted to get it wrapped up. This game needed to be concluded, so she kind of hit fast forward on the last few levels, which meant we could get our characters to 20th level without having to grind for it and put everyone through a whole bunch of problematic social dynamics.
Yeah.
Instead, let's get this campaign wrapped up where we're all still good with each other. We can wrap it up and move on from this. And it worked. It's just, we went from 17th to 20th in about 4 sessions. So it works.
Now, where you have the downside to this is, I'm going to roll out my favorite now 5th edition adventure to pick on here, but in Vecna Eve of Ruin, every chapter you complete, you're supposed to get a level. So you start off at like 12th level, you're supposed to end it like at 20th level when you finally, are ready to confront Vecna. But I won't spoil this for anyone, but there is an extremely stupid twist about what you're doing. And if you find that twist out early, you don't do any of those chapters. And the book tells you, just level them up to 19th level then. And I don't want to have a party that starts off at 12th level be really smart and outthink the very bad plot twist, and then just tell them, okay, make yourselves 19th level now. That feels so unearned, so unfun to me. Like I'm not, I don't want people to jump through hoops, but at the same time,
you still want to feel like you've earned your levels.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, you also want to feel like you've had the opportunity to play with the abilities you've gotten at your current level to the point that you're comfortable and confident with them before you start adding in more stuff.
And if you're really curious about all of the stuff that I pulled my hair out over in Vecna Eve of Ruin, I did write about that on my blog, if you want to read that.
Didn't you and Chris also do an episode while I was
Yeah, I think we did talk about that too.
Plague? I
talked about that on multiple podcasts.
I think if you go back to January 2024,
yeah,
there's an episode of Jared and Chris talking about it because I had COVID and I was not human for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I put like way too much effort into thinking about that adventure, but that is my example of why sometimes milestones can be a downside if you don't think them through enough, and you have a situation like that where it's like, well, now they're going to go to the end right away. I have to give them all of these levels now just so that they're ready for that endpoint.
Why would somebody want to keep track of XP and give it out to the PCs more traditionally?
There is something to be said for seeing the experience point bar go up. I will say there's a little bit more of a thrill on the player's side versus the GM side for jumping through whatever hoops you're supposed to figure out how many XP you're handing somebody. But there is a little bit of a thrill, seeing that and going, I'm 75% of the way there. Is it going to be next session or the session after that?
I do think if you are running a more old school style game, it may feel more appropriate to just hand out the XP at the end of the encounter, the end of the session, however you want to handle it, or at the beginning of the next session after you've had time to do math. But at the same time, it may feel more appropriate if you are playing in that old school style. I also think it could be useful in a West Marches style campaign where people may be dropping in and out, and you want to be able to, like the person who's there every session, they're going to level up a little quicker because they are there and doing things while other people, their characters off screen, not participating in the adventure. It really depends on the type of game you're running. I think that it can work that way.
There is something similar I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but it does encourage certain things in a sandbox style campaign because you can reward people for going and doing this thing over here and going and doing this thing over here, where it's not necessarily you need to be this level to fight this boss, but you still want to be able to reward them. And that's the other thing I was going to say. Like in 3rd edition, I used to do this a lot where I would tell people, you get this many from just the regular session, and I'm also giving you 500 because you went and talked to the cleric over in this temple on top of everything else you were doing. And then you can actually be more granular and tell people, I am specifically giving you this extra because you've done this. So I think it's useful in that case because, then you can illustrate, here are the things that were good for you to do. These are the things that are good for the campaign to move forward.
It may come off as a little hypocritical of me to say this, since I have clearly declared that I don't like doing the accountant level math that is sometimes required to do the nitty-gritty accounting in the background. But as a new GM, it can be useful to keep track so you can kind of get a feel for how much goes into each level. What are the number of encounters and types of things the players did to get from this level to the next level.
So I am now going to tell you the evil, horrible thing that I did as a 3rd edition GM, which is after a while, I got really tired of trying to follow the actuary charts to figure out exactly how many XP to award people. And I started thinking, okay, if they do the bare minimum, they should level up after 8 sessions. So I'm going to take the difference between 5th level and 6th level and divide it by 8. Now, I'm going to have a certain places where if they do something up above and beyond, they're going to get an extra packet. So if they do enough of those, they might level up after 5 sessions instead of 8 sessions because they've gotten all the extra packets that I'm awarding them for doing the stuff above and beyond. So in that case, I'm still using XP, but I am definitely not using it the way 3rd edition told me to do it.
In modern games, is it okay to have player characters at different levels?
I think it's something that's going to be different based on what type of game you're running. Friend of the show, Brandon Stoddard, it's sort of a West Marches game. It is basically everybody is playing mercenaries that work for this big mercenary company, and they take different jobs every time they go to a session. And in a game like that, where you have this feeling that you're going on different missions, it feels okay to have like a 4th level person and a 7th level person and a 6th level person all there together, because you do kind of feel like we're a mercenary company where it's just random, not random, but different people going on different missions based on what they're good at and who's available. In a game like that, I think it does work.
Yeah, my answer to this question is putting quote marks around, it depends.
Do you have to pay Sean Kelly money when you say that?
I do. There's just a little bit of money that comes out of my checking account, goes right to Sean's Patreon. For the most part, D&D and similar games build encounters with the understanding that the characters are all going to be at certain levels. You can deviate from that, but you need to be aware of what you're getting into. If you're not careful with it, players that are too low might just easily get taken out in one shot in the encounter. Or conversely, if the encounter is, geared towards a bunch of 4th level characters, that 7th level character could just come in and deal with it in all, like, a couple of swipes before anyone else gets to do anything. It is very much a balancing act to try and put together encounters that are going to be balanced, for lack of a better word, for characters of different levels. This isn't to say you can't do it, it's just you have to be very mindful about how you do it.
What's really funny is playing in that game of Brandis's, I've been like average level before, and I've been the low level one before. And I will say 5th edition is probably, because of bounded accuracy and everything like that, you are more likely to still be able to contribute if you are lower level in 5th edition than you were in other editions. You're not necessarily just going to be standing there so that you can get XP. But the problem comes in is, yes, my guiding bolt did just as much damage as anybody else's guiding bolt, and I hit the monster and contributed, but I can only get hit by that thing one time, and everybody else here can get hit 2 or 3 times.
God, I remember the days of playing EverQuest and trying to help a lower level character level, and you run around with them and you hit the monster enough to like get it down, but don't kill it, and then they run up and stab it and kill it and get the experience points. But you can't be grouped with them, because then it would kill it, because it negates the XP because you're too high of a level. It's like, we don't need to be playing video games here, people. If you want to play a video game, we've all got computers or devices now.
It is funny, though. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but like the way this conversation came about with you arguing with the people about whether they should have gotten XP in a 2nd edition game, people remember some of that stuff more harsh than it actually was in the books. Gygax, of all people, was saying everybody in an encounter should get an equal amount of experience points unless one person literally killed the thing by themselves.
Yeah.
So that's from the start.
To be fair, I wasn't arguing with the person who made the original post.
Right.
There was somebody who came in afterwards to kind of be like, but what about this? And talking about running a game where not everyone shows up, where not everyone is as committed to the game as everyone else. And I'm like, look, if you have problems with players not showing up to game, that's a different problem than handling XP with your group.
Yeah.
If you are playing with people you enjoy, and there are just certain people who can't be there every session, but you still enjoy their company and you still enjoy their participation in the game when they can't have, why would you want to punish them just because life means it's harder for them to get to game?
Oh yeah.
It's I get it. You want to reward the people that are there, but to a certain degree, the people that are there are getting rewarded by getting to play.
The funny thing is I remember seeing this debate in 3rd edition, because I did start 3rd edition thinking, oh, if you're not at a session, I'm giving you XP. And the more I like read people talking about it and, read forums and saw the people that were for not giving people XP didn't seem to be the people that ran games the same way that I ran games. It eventually made me go, I want everybody to be able to participate. I want everybody to have fun. And what I was saying before, where you're sitting there going, is it going to be 1 session or 2 before I level up? If you're that close and you don't level up, that feels bad, just because you were sick or because you had a work thing or whatever.
Yeah. And, as I said before, it's not, none of it. Yes, there are kids playing this game, but even the kids playing today have a lot of commitments in their life, a lot of things that mean they can't just stay focused on role-playing games. We've got a lot going on in our lives, and sometimes that means not everyone can participate at the same level, But if you still enjoy the participation they can give you, why punish them? Why punish somebody for that?
Mm-hmm.
What is your preferred way of handling experience?
See, what's funny about this is I really don't have a preferred way, because in the Thursday night game, which is a campaign that I'm making up all of the encounters and everything and incorporating stuff that all of you are doing. So it's not like a pre-written adventure or anything. We're just doing that by story-based things. When it seems like a good point, when it seems like you've accomplished something, you get a level. The Saturday game that we're doing, where we're playing the Thrones and Bones setting, those are published adventures, but they have the thing you can give out XP, or you can just have people level up every chapter. I've just been having people level up every chapter because that's the more laid back way to do it, and that way everybody's going to be able to handle whatever threat is in the next chapter.
And again, it's a game we play once a month, if we're lucky, and basically it lets us experience the setting in the game as if we were getting to play more often.
Now, for my Curse of Strahd game, I'm basically using Milestones the way the 5th edition DMG uses Milestone, where sort of you're getting XP for doing specific things. You're not leveling up, you're just getting XP when you do certain things. The reason for that is Curse of Strahd is weird because it is a very story heavy game, but it's also very much a sandbox thing where it's like I'm going to throw this out here. I don't think this is the number, but there's like 10 major important places that you can go in Barovia. Nothing tells you can't go to any of them at any given time. So in that case, it is harder to do the whole, it's time for you to be this level because this chapter's over, because it's not really like that. You might go to like a place and find out, oh, this is very dangerous, we should go somewhere else. And it is more organic than that. Instead of me coming up with how many XP they should get for every little thing that they're doing, I got a book off of the DM's Guild called Structured Milestone XP for Curse of Strahd. What this does is, instead of making it XP, it does the same basic thing, but it's saying, if they get 4 milestones, let them level up to 4th level. If they get 9 milestones, let them level up to 5th level. And the point is, you're not tracking a bunch of little XP, but you are still advancing things in a more granular manner. And what I like about how this is set up is everything major that you're supposed to do in Curse of Strahd is a milestone. Anything that's really, really major is like 2 milestones. But it also lets them say, if you explore a new place, that's a half a milestone. So it's just encouraging you to actually travel around Barovia and giving you those milestones for just traveling. It also has there's a whole list of fairly important magic items and things that you can get in the game, but you don't necessarily need them. And those are all worth 25% of a milestone. So you find 4 of those and you get a milestone. So it's not just encouraging you to run around trying to find all these magic items, but it is saying, hey, you did do the extra work and picked up these 4, so now you have another milestone. I really like that. It's really nice because it's a good balance between having that more granular advancement, but not having to worry about whether 250 is too little or 500 is too much, trying to figure out those things.
I generally prefer milestone, but how I determine that milestone varies from homebrew campaign to published campaign. Many of the published campaigns tell you what level the PCs are expected to be for each part, whether that's a chapter or a section. So it's indicating they should be that level by that point. In Dragon Heist, each chapter was for a new level, and that one takes them from 1st level to 5th level. And for the most part, I followed that, and basically just once they'd finished most of the stuff in the chapter, I'd let them level up. I had to do a little bit of wiggle work because they completely skipped whatever chapter it was you were supposed to do faction stuff. None of my players were interested in that, so I had to come up with some stuff. The old Margrave also has them as a different level for each adventure, but each adventure is not necessarily meaty enough to warrant leveling.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to mix in other stuff that they're interested in between the actual published adventures. When I did the kids game using Icespire Peak, that one it was interesting because it was designed to be an introduction to D&D, and it gives you 3 starting adventures that are supposed to be for 1st through 3rd level, and basically whatever ones they do, once they finish that adventure, they get the next level. After that, it starts giving you other adventures to mix in, and the idea is that they level up after doing 2 of those adventures, which was pretty interesting. Now, when I'm doing a homebrew campaign, I will sometimes keep a loose track of XP from various encounters, but I really only use it as a ballpark to tell them when to level up. I do have my spreadsheets from when I was running the Pathfinder Eberron game, and I think I have something similar for the Depths of Zendrick campaign, because it's just, I'm winging this. I just want to make sure I've got enough stuff they've done between levels to warrant getting to the next level, but it's still very much a ballpark and based on vibes.
Yeah.
When does it feel good for them to level up?
And it's probably worth throwing this out here, since we always kind of like pitch this anyway, because we both love it so much. Shard actually will tell you how much XP an encounter is worth and then just assign it at the end of an encounter.
Yeah.
The problem with that is it's hardwired to be the 2014 version of XP and CR.
It also, I don't know if they have fixed this because I stopped trying to use it. It also had an issue when there were friendly NPCs in the encounter, and if players weren't around, but their characters were played. So it was very strict about, like, these ones were here, so they get the XP, and it was just, when I started using it with the Depths of Zendrick campaign, I'm like, oh, this is not even close to what I have in my little loose spreadsheet here. So we're just going to ignore this. So I generally skip the give XP portion of it, but it is there, and it has probably been adjusted since 2024, 23, when I was running that campaign.
I think that basically kind of brings us around to saying sometimes XP is good and sometimes it's not.
Leveling is always good for the players. The players always want to level.
Yeah.
The question is how do you, as the GM, want to let them have those levels? Don't be stingy, but also make sure you pace it so you're not overwhelmed because they get way too powerful, way too quick.
I think we could probably sum it up by saying, if you have a campaign where there are going to be these threshold moments of doing specific important things, you probably want to do that story-based advancement. If you want to reward people for little granular things and let them know that this is what worthy of XP and this isn't, and all of that, and especially if you're doing something that's more of a sandbox, there is a lot of value to still using standard XP.
Yeah.
Now let's join Ange and Jared for some downtime research, where they do the work so we don't have to.
Every episode, we're going to look for something related to D&D that we want to pass along to the listeners. It might be products, websites, videos, or podcasts, but it'll always be something that we think will enhance your D&D experience.
I have been paying a bit of attention to Cubicle 7 for a while now, considering my love of the Doctor Who RPG and my involvement in Victoriana. So it is worth pointing out that they currently have a Kickstarter for a new 5e book, Uncharted Dungeons. It is intended to give you all sorts of tools to use when running dungeons. It is part of the same series that includes Uncharted Dungeons, A Life Well Lived, which both Jared and I have raved about, and a couple of other, I forget there's the alchemy book and the crafting book.
Hammer and Blade and something, which is the alchemy one.
Yeah. It's all part of the same series, and you can actually get all the rest of those books as part of this Kickstarter. If any of these would be a delightful addition to your GMing repertoire, and this one is specifically for dungeons, which I am interested to get because I've kind of mumbled before that I'm not the biggest fan of running dungeons, because I'm just like, I don't know how to pace them well. So it's the Vault 5e Uncharted Dungeons by Cubicle 7s, and there'll be a link in the show notes to the Kickstarter, which it just started, so it should still have a couple of weeks when this episode airs.
The funny thing about that, too, is looking at the sample that you can download, they are definitely touching on some things that we have, like, do you give a theme to your dungeon? If you have a theme, what are you going to do to reinforce that theme? which is exactly what I want out of a dungeon book. I don't necessarily want, how can you make your players pull their hair out because they didn't think to do this one specific thing? I want theme and story to come out of my dungeons.
Yeah.
So for what I would like to present, oh my goodness, we live in a universe that some comic book villain tore apart and has been reassembled, and we're in the second act and nobody has taken it back apart again and fixed it. That's what's going on. And as evidence of that, Dungeons and Dragons is now on Demiplane. Now, if you've never looked at Demiplane, you're probably going to go, well, what's the big deal about that? They're on different VTTs. No, Demiplane literally does the same thing as D&D Beyond. They're going to someone that does the same thing as their own site does. And actually, some things Demiplane does, it does better than D&D Beyond.
Wasn't Demiplane made by the people who made D&D Beyond?
Yes.
But after it was sold to Wizards, they moved on and made Demiplane?
When Adam Bradford left D&D Beyond, he went over to Demiplane, and Demiplane was basically his idea for D&D Beyond 2.0, where it was more modular and it could handle all of the little rules widgets that D&D Beyond doesn't handle well, because D&D Beyond is really hardwired to have done the 2014 rules and everything else is a challenge for them to implement. So this is fascinating to me. Now, all of this stems from the fact that Demiplane is owned by Roll20. But that also means if you own the books on Roll20, you have access to them on Demiplane now, which is another thing that's like really cool. They do not have the character builder working yet, but there is a spot for it. So I don't think it's that they're not going to do it. I think they just haven't finished implementing it yet. And I bring that up because Demiplane's character builder for everything I have used it for so far, for Marvel, for Daggerheart, is so much better than how either Roll20 or D&D Beyond does character builders. That's just going to be awesome. There is a downside, because it does look like they're only bringing over the 2024 books. It doesn't look like they're going to go back and pull in all the 2014 books and put those in there. And also, we'll see whether third parties get to integrate with them in the character builder or in this area. This would be the perfect way for them to do it, but that doesn't mean that the lawyers at WotC are going to say, yeah, let them put their feats on our character sheet. So it's going to be really interesting to see, but I was shocked as heck when I first saw it. So we will have a link to the Dungeons and Dragons Nexus, because they renamed the 5e Nexus, which was their general 5e OGL reference pages, to the Dungeons and Dragons Nexus now.
I mean, they've got the connection now. We are happily part of the Polygamers Podcast Network, helping you run and play your best games. We think you'll enjoy another Polygamers podcast like
The Gnome Cast. Several gnomes from Gnomes 2 get together to talk about gaming topics and themselves in an effort to entertain you and to avoid being thrown in the stew.
We have used up all of our resources and gained some XP, so I think it's time for a long rest. I hope this adventure was rewarding for you, and we hope you'll go exploring with us when we start our next adventure.